Hey everyone, how's it going? It's Anthony Cosenza and John Sheeran with the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We appreciate you joining us for this live listener question segment here. Again, for those of you who have been listening to us the past couple of weeks, there's been some changes to our usual platform. So bear with us as we kind of get started. As things kind of throwing us for a little bit of a loop once again. But John, I guess we could start off here because John, for those before we kind of get to the listener questions, we've already got some queued up actually, but just to let the listeners know, you had an opportunity to interview some people with the Bengals, kind of a little bit of a surprise, and if you would tell us a little bit about it, because this is now available on our part of them are available on YouTube as we sit here today on Friday afternoon, and then the rest of the audio is definitely available in the other channels. But tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll get going with some of these listener questions.
Exactly. A more prominent and trusting relationship, because in the past, there's not been tension, but there just hasn't been a lot of connection.
John, I apologize. This is one of the kinks that we're working through. We lost a little bit of audio here, so just if you can briefly, I hate to make you repeat yourself, just tell us about the opportunity. For those who are just joining us, there's a lot of people who said they lost the audio here. I think there was a mute situation going on here, but real quickly, for those who are just joining us, we're going to get to listener questions in just a second, but what John was talking about, and I'm going to let him kind of re-intro it. I apologize, John. He had a unique opportunity to talk to some Bengals players. This stuff is now on our audio channels. It will be all on our YouTube channel as well. John, you were talking about speaking with some Bengals players after a training camp practice and the unique opportunity there.
Yeah, so essentially, Emily Parker runs media relations with the Bengals, invited me, Jake Lisco, and Nick Manchester, and a bunch of other guys, but we were the guys who ended up coming down to basically have media access for training camp practice. And she gave us a tour of the stadium. She got us interviews with the players. The interviews are now up on our YouTube channel. Even an interview with Zach Taylor. And we got on the field for the training camp practice, got in contact with Paul Dignan Jr., Ben Davey, Richard Skinner, who worked with the team as well. And it was an incredible experience, and an experience that none of us at Cincy Jungle have ever had the opportunity of doing. And this was Emily's way of kind of building a relationship between the non-traditional media who covers the Bengals and the Bengals organization in general. And this is the first time that they ever did something like this. And we are so gracious for Emily for giving us the opportunity to kind of see what goes on with the traditional media and covering the Bengals, and kind of how the two sides work together, and just the overall process of how they manage player relations and media relations in general. And the opportunity that we got to actually have access to, firsthand quotes and interviews, and being up close to practice like that, and interacting with the players in a way that we at Cincy Jungle have never had the experience to do before is, I can't express my gratitude enough for Emily for, really reaching out to us and kickstarting hopefully what is to be a long-lasting relationship between us non-traditional media members and the Bengals organization as a whole. And it was an incredible experience that I hope that we can do again in the future.
Yeah, look, this is a really cool opportunity. Very cool that two people from Cincy Jungle, and if you really want to be technical, Jake used to do some stuff for CJ a little while ago as well. So a lot of people with Cincy Jungle roots are, involved in this, and they reached out to us. So obviously they know we're doing something right, both at Cincy Jungle and on this podcast. They know that the Locked On Bengals podcast is doing something right and getting fans' attention. So kudos to the Bengals and our gratitude to the Bengals for doing that. Truth be told, this really isn't one of the first times that the bank, we knocked them about not giving us credentials and regularly and other things. Truth be told, a few years back in a previous podcast that I was involved in, some of you may remember Mickey Menser and Nick Suberling. They got invited to kind of special VIP access at the Taste of the NFL event that they do over the summer, or maybe that's the springtime. But they invited us from the show to go be a part of that. So, the Bengals don't like to beat their own drum in terms of, things they do for the public and everything. But, it's a pretty cool thing. And this is the latest and greatest example of it. So for those of you who are just joining us and those of you who do not know, we have audio of all of the interviews. They are currently separated by player in the iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, all that stuff. You can get those there. And then you can also get, right now, half of them are up on YouTube. We're going to upload the rest of the half by the end of Friday, and they'll be up for this weekend. So check those out. Pretty cool stuff. Now, we're going to get to these questions. There's a lot in the YouTube chat already. We've got some texts queued up. So we're going to try and get to as many as we can here in a short amount of time. We'll be here maybe about 20 or 30 minutes. And then, let you get on your way and get your weekend started. Get the Bengals first preseason game started. So get it started the right way by hanging out with us. John, by the way, for the listeners as well, you can call or text. We will be taking phone calls if you want, 949-542-6241. Leave your comments in the live YouTube chat. Leave them in the thread on cincyjungle.com. There's a post there. Tweet them at us at BengalsOBI. So, John, this is from Isaac Cowlishaw, I believe. He has texted us a couple of times, and since we have not been able to do a listener questions show recently, we wanted to get to him first. This goes back a little while to the AJ Green injury and everything. Do you think we could get AJ Green on a cheaper contract due to his recent injury history and, of course, what's happening right now?
That is actually a really good question, because I've been thinking about what that process is going on right now with the uncertainty, at least maybe building up on the Bengals side of this negotiation. And obviously AJ's agent is making sure that he's going to get every penny that he deserves. But I do think that, obviously they don't like to deal with a lot of guaranteed money, especially with these contracts now that they're entering into their 30s. But I do think that the Bengals have a chance or a case in their mind to really maybe get somewhat of a discount in terms of guaranteed money for AJ. I think he's still going to be around where the market is resetting right now. Maybe not eclipsing the likes of OBJ and Antonio Brown and those guys necessarily, because they were on, or at least OBJ was at least younger and he's on his second contract. But I do think that there is a chance that they can get him for a little bit less guaranteed money, and how Green has potentially less leverage in this deal. But I don't think, now saying all that, I don't think that they've lost any commitment in terms of locking up AJ for another 3 or 4 years. I still think that they view him as the same player that they did before this injury, and we know how they feel about these injuries now. They're committed to Tyler Eifert and other guys who unfortunately haven't been proven to be durable over the last couple of years. But I do think that there is a chance that they get him for a little bit less guaranteed money. But I think the total money, the big number that we end up seeing plastered over the headlines, I think it's going to be relatively the same, because I don't think you can necessarily label Green as completely injury prone to the level of Tyler Eifert, but he is certainly getting there, and the fact that he's getting older doesn't really help.
Yeah, I don't think you could get him cheap. I think it may. There's a little bit more leverage in the Bengals' corner, and they may utilize that. It sounds like AJ Green wants to stay in Cincinnati, so that's a good thing. And I think he should stay in Cincinnati. He should remain a Bengal for the rest of his career. Hopefully, he kind of stays healthy towards the end of his career and really solidifies what is looking like a Hall of Fame career. I think the Bengals can maybe get a deal, but still he'll command big money. Maybe it's on the guaranteed front and that sort of thing where they can kind of get a little creative and a little more flexible. But for now, it looks like the Bengals are going to still pay some good money in order to keep him probably for another 2 or 3 years. You have been, so a lot of these questions I'm looking at, moving on to in the live YouTube chat, a lot of them are basically how have players been looking in camp. I'm going to rely on you a bit more for these because you have not only been in camp in person to watch these people in person, but you also spoke to one of the players that's being referenced. Point Blank Sports No Era Lines. How's Tate looked in training camp? Wow, just got out of the hospital and found out my wife has cancer today. Out of the loop right now in Houday. Well, first things first, man. We don't have a real name for you or anything, but our best to you and your wife on that. That's a real big bummer, and hopefully, this little show that we do, and hopefully what the Bengals do, can maybe lift some spirits, and best of recoveries to your wife there, but. He's referring, of course, to Auden Tate, a guy who was the kind of the preseason darling last year. This year, Damian Willis has kind of taken that role, the preseason darling. Your thoughts on Tate? We've talked a little bit about him on our regular show, but how has he been looking?
I think he's been looking fine, all things considered. He looks a little bit trimmer compared to last year. I think he was near 230 pounds. I know a lot of fans were like, we should bulk him up to 245 so he can be a tight end. He's actually trimmed down, I think, probably around 220. He looks a little bit more leaner, and I think he does look a little more explosive, a little more fast, and again, that's relative because of how not fast and not explosive he used to be at 21 years old coming out of Florida State, but he's been getting a lot of experience and reps on special teams, specifically with the first team, and as a receiver, he's looked about the same as he's always been, just a great contested catch, high-pointing jump ball type of guy who can dominate in the red zone and go get balls downfield. He's been primarily with the second team along with Willis and Alex Erickson, and I do think right now he's probably on the outside looking in just because of how many reps Josh Malone and Cody Core have been getting with the starters with AJ Green and John Ross out. So with that in mind, if they're going to go with 6, I think Tate is looking at another year on the practice squad potentially, but even then he would be competing with guys like Damian Willis and Stanley Morgan for that distinction as well. So there's a lot of competition going on in that wide receiver group, and at least in the past couple of years, we've seen guys who just end up not producing in the regular season, but just turning it on in the preseason and in training camp, just looking a lot better than what they actually are. And I think you can maybe classify Tate in that category right now, but he looks fine, and he looks like he definitely belongs, and he's definitely going to be around throughout the entirety of the preseason. It wouldn't shock me if he made it because they're giving him more opportunities on the special teams, and it wouldn't shock me if he didn't because of how strong the rest of the receiving group is.
Yeah, Tate, kind of a little bit behind the 8 ball this year, which is weird to say because he gained so much momentum in the preseason, then a little bit at the end of the season as well, but different coaching staff, right? The staff may not really look for the skill set or what Auden Tate is going to bring to this different offense. So, he's a little bit behind the 8 ball. Like you said, some of the undrafted kids are impressing. And we say this every year. There's a guy every year, right? There's a guy every year or 2 guys every year. Oh, the Bengals, they got to keep this undrafted guy. They got to keep him. They got to keep him. They got to get him on the final roster. What happens most of the time is that those guys do not make the final roster, and then they'll never make it through waivers. Well, guess what happens? They make it through waivers, and the Bengals hang on to him, and they hang on to him on their practice squad. So let's not panic if one of these guys that we like end up getting cut. Somebody could pick him up, but they've also had the chance to do that for a little while here, and it hasn't happened. So it's a good problem to have that they've got some back end talent at that receiver group, especially with John Ross experiencing an injury, AJ Green experiencing an injury. They need more help there. Let's see here. More questions along the same lines of how have people looked. It was Brian Cluxton who said, "How is Pratt doing?" You spoke to him. He was one of the interviews. He's, as of the depth chart that was released a couple of days ago, he is kind of a backup player at this point, but probably to see a number of snaps. What's your impression of him? And especially just kind of in speaking with him, how he's grasping the defense.
Yeah, he is with the second team unit. He's been wearing the audio mic in his helmet, calling plays for the second team. He's been working a lot with Jordan Evans in that regard. And if I said it before, they've been primarily just in nickel defense. And there's only been about two linebackers on the field at all times, and they usually have that big safety kind of come down there. But Pratt has been fine. He's been going through the motions just like any rookie linebacker specifically. And you have to remember, he doesn't have that much experience as a linebacker. He was a converted safety. And I just think he's just growing right now right before our eyes. And it didn't help that he missed some time in the spring in OTAs with an injury and kind of behind some other guys in that position group. But he was a really fun interview. He actually, when asked about having the mic in his helmet and having to call plays, he said for the first time when he did, he like started a lot, and he just had to really just step up and just kind of get used to it. And I think he's adapted well. Obviously, it's hard for linebackers to really translate extremely early into their careers, but he's going to get an opportunity to play a ton of snaps in this preseason, and hopefully he steps up and gets a big role in this defense, because at this point they're going to have the same three starting linebackers or two starting linebackers out there in week one as they did last year, and this is by far the weakest position group on that defense. So if there's any one new face specifically on this team that they could use to step up, it's definitely Pratt, and I don't think he's there. This preseason will go a long way in determining how far along he is.
This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We're doing a listener question show, specific listener question show as the Bengals get ready. We're here Friday afternoon, Friday evening for some of you, the day before kickoff for the Cincinnati Bengals kickoff to the 2019 season. They will be hosted by the Kansas City Chiefs in their preseason opener. So a lot of eyes on the team, a lot of interest in terms of, how this team's going to come out, what they're going to look like, some of the new players on the team. As I mentioned, my co-host John Sheeran had a cool opportunity to speak to a number of different members of the Bengals, including head coach Zach Taylor, quarterback Andy Dalton, and others. So all of that interview stuff is on our channels or will be up on YouTube. But you can get the audio on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Play, and on the Megaphone platform. So get it how you can. We appreciate the support. We're going to be here for a little while longer, so leave a question for us in the live YouTube chat. Leave it in the Q&A comment section on cincyjungle.com. Tweet at us at BengalsOBI, or you can call or text us at 949-542-6241. John, I'm seeing a lot of questions about running backs. Andrew Greer, do you think we'll use 3 running backs this year? Jamie Craig, can Travion Williams surprise us tomorrow as far as running the ball? There was a kind of a comment / question from Dan from Tennessee earlier this week about via text. Dan from Tennessee, great show. I really believe we got some good running backs and that our running game could be good with some decent blocking. Running backs can make a difference in the play action game. So running backs are on a lot of people's minds right now. I don't know. What's your take on this? I mean, do you think last year, if you want to use the Rams offense as a barometer, they really rode Todd Gurley a lot. They started to use CJ Anderson when Gurley was kind of hurt around the postseason-ish time. At the end of the year. So they used him. Really wasn't a back by committee. The Bengals think they have a player in Gurley's mold, like Joe Mixon. I don't know. Is this kind of a one one horse show with Joe Mixon, or are they going to spread that ball around a lot to a guy like Travion Williams, to obviously Gio Bernard?
Well, the Rams ran Todd Gurley all the way to arthritis in his knees.
Right.
So I think if Taylor has any sense, he would say that, yeah, we're not going to use Joe Mixon as much as the Rams used Todd Gurley last year up until they had to use C.J. Anderson. And even when C.J. Anderson was on the field, up until the Super Bowl, like, they were still sustaining production as an offense. And I think we'll see tomorrow why Travion Williams can show that running backs, by and large, are expendable. And Joe Mixon might be the slight exception because of how talented he is. But, do I think they're going to use 3 running backs all year? Look at the position right now. Like, they're dealing with injuries with Mixon. They're dealing with injuries with Bernard. Both those guys had dealt with injuries last year. They just got Rodney Anderson back off the NFI. And who knows if, with how injury prone he was in college, who knows if that's going to sustain. Williams is almost like the lone survivor right now at the position group. And I really do think they like Jordan Ellis, who's an undrafted guy from Virginia. He's taking second team reps with the offense. Both Ellis and Williams are very good pass protectors, and that will go a long way in terms of getting them a lot of exposure in preseason. I do think Williams is a natural runner. He's a smart kid. We interviewed him as well. He was very open with us and just a very energetic guy, very eager to work. And he's a talented guy in all 3 phases of the game, as a runner, as a pass catcher, and a pass blocker. So that will get him opportunities as early as possible for any rookie running back can. And yeah, I do think that they're obviously going to feature Mixon as much as they feel comfortable doing. They understand the talent that they have in a guy like Bernard, but they like Williams a lot. They like Anderson a lot, and I think there's going to be a healthy rotation with at least 2 or 3 of those guys. And injuries are inevitably going to occur at that position with the wear and tear that they take, and the fact of both Bernard and Mixon are piling up some injuries and injury history on their resume, and obviously a guy like Anderson who you can't fully trust yet. So Williams has a chance to really establish himself as some form of a stable rock in the position group, and I do think that's going to carry some momentum with him into the regular season, and how they're going to implement most of those guys in a rotation in an offense where, as far as we know, they plan on establishing the run, which is so mid-2000s. But unfortunately, I think it's going to be kind of the plan here in building this offense.
Yeah, is Sean Alexander available? We could maybe they could give him a call. A little bit of good news, bad news with the Bengals running back committee that you've kind of alluded to. On the good news front, the rookies, Travion Williams has looked very good in camp by most reports. Like you said, seems to be a versatile guy, can catch the ball, obviously has a relationship with Jim Turner and knows the scheme that the Bengals are going to try and employ on the offensive line. So there's some comfort factor there. And then the Bengals got back, as you mentioned off the PUP list, Rodney Anderson, an exciting rookie who probably would have been a day 2 pick had he not torn his knee ligament early last year. So, very good news there. Now, bad news, you look at who will or will not play in terms of this preseason opener coming up on Saturday. Giovanni Bernard, Joe Mixon, and Rodney Anderson will not be playing. Anderson was a bit to be expected because he just came off the PUP. Obviously, there's some conditioning, and they want to make sure they take it slow with him, but so there's a little bit of good news, bad news there. You're going to see a lot of Williams. Hopefully he stays healthy through this game, and then some others. I do think that the Bengals have a chance to keep 4 running backs, including Anderson and Williams, along with Bernard and, of course, Joe Mixon. So the next question here wasn't really a question, kind of a statement, but it is something we should address because there was some really kind of fluid, I don't necessarily want to call them weak, but some trade rumors potentially of the Bengals maybe dealing Giovanni Bernard potentially to the Redskins, maybe in a package for Trent Williams. Obviously, that would not be a straight-up player-for-player trade. I would think Washington would say definitely no to that. But, I don't know if you've heard anything else. I think that has since been debunked. Like I said, the rumors were kind of a little flimsy in the first place. I think it kind of started with Gio's agent being in Cincinnati, and then, things kind of ran wild from there. Anything you want to add to that in terms of things you've heard, or I don't know.
You're so courteous that you didn't want to call them weak. They were absolutely weak. There was no rumors about Gio Bernard getting traded. There was a talk about his agent being in town, and if anything, that could have signaled that they were discussing an extension, which is honestly not a very good idea with the investment that they made at the running back position. The fact that you're giving a running back a third after a second contract, and that we've seen have teams replace running backs so easily with so much care, by letting those rookie contracts expire. But there was no rumor about Giovanni Bernard getting traded for Trent Williams, and I don't think there's any way to Trent Williams being acquired by the Bengals in any way, sense, or form. So no, there's no validity in that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't think so, and it's going to take a big. I think the only way that a Trent Williams trade occurs with the Bengals is probably if the Bengals go through. If number one, Trent Williams continues to hold out, and there's no, there's just a complete impasse there that is irreparable. But also, I think the Bengals will probably have to go through at least 2 preseason games, maybe even the entire preseason, and feel very uncomfortable with how things are looking on the offensive line, and maybe make a move from there.
That might just be a reality in that sense.
It might be. It probably would cost them. I don't think it would cost them an arm and a leg, given the fact that Trent Williams apparently wants out of there so bad. But and he's up there a little bit in age, but it would cost them a pretty penny, I would think, to get him, because he is a premium player at a premium position, and really would kind of just be a Band-Aid for this year. Maybe they would extend a guy like that. I don't know. Obviously, that would then take the reshuffling of Cordy Glenn back inside to guard. What do you do when Jonah Williams comes back? Maybe he's your right tackle. I don't know. I think in theory, it's a good move, and should be at least explored. Who knows if it will be. We're going to get out of here in just a few more minutes. He's John Sheeran. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider. We've got another question from Dave Lennox asking about the secondary. He said last year they were pretty bad, and all they did to boost them was add BW Webb. I'm going to say this. I don't necessarily think the secondary was bad last year. In fact, I think the safeties, you could argue, were 2 of the most productive players on the entire football team last year, and Jesse Bates and Sean Williams. So if they play anywhere near, they both led the team in tackles. They both led the team in interceptions. They were 1-2, 1-2. Which isn't leading the team in tackles by your safeties isn't a good sign. So I think, unfortunately, the secondary took a little bit of a brunt from a poor run defense, some injuries in the front 7, all that kind of stuff. But where they really were weak was the dropped interceptions. We've talked about that a lot. Over the past few months, John, in terms of, basically their 3 former first-round picks, Denard, Jackson, and Kirkpatrick, failed to yield an interception last year. So that obviously has to change. But, I mean, completion percentage wasn't outrageous. It was more getting off the field on 3rd down. It was more the dropped interceptions. But, for the most part, that wasn't the weakest part of the defense, in my opinion. I don't know if you have a different opinion, as well as what they look like so far under Lou Anarumo.
I mean, the talent of the secondary has been there for at least the last couple of years, and I think the talent increased last year, and the talent increased with BW Webb this year. I think he was a solid addition in terms of a free agent signing, and it's going to be interesting how they handle Dennard coming back, with Webb taking all the starting reps at training camp in the slot as your nickel cornerback. But William Jackson's looked fine. We haven't heard a lot from Drake Kirkpatrick, which for his case is a good thing, because the more we hear about Drake Kirkpatrick, it's usually not good things on the field. But Bates has looked phenomenal in year 2. Williams has always been solid. They've used a lot of Clayton Fetulum, even with the first team, as your big safety, and when you're in those single high looks and dropping down to the box. So they're getting pretty uniform in terms of how they're utilizing that back end, in terms of just going in primarily single high looks and using Bates and Brandon Wilson in your first and second team defense. But the secondaries look fine. Obviously, in training camp, receivers tend to go off sometimes because there's not a lot of contact allowed on the perimeter with those guys. But Jackson's guys handle a lot of balls. Webb has looked fine in this defense. He should be familiar with it, because his defensive coordinator was defensive backs coach last year. But I don't think it's far from a weakness. It's not necessarily a top-of-the-league strength, but it's not going to be the reason why this defense doesn't progress. And the things that I've seen from training camp kind of solidify that so far.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but, I think if the Bengals defense plays, at average or maybe a little bit above average level throughout most of the season, this this team could be very competitive. I think also that if I don't know exactly offhand. I'd have to look. I don't have the information in front of me, but just say I can think of maybe 2 interceptions a piece that those 3 players I mentioned, Denard, Kirkpatrick, Jackson, should have corralled last year. I mean, imagine if they each had one, if they each had, if they each made all of those plays, a 6-win record maybe becomes, 2 more wins because of the amount of turn. You know what I mean? So it may be a reach to say that, but those are game-changing plays that were not made. And those are the little things that really caught up to the Bengals as the year wore on. Hopefully, there's a renewed focus and a renewed energy that helps eliminate those dumb mistakes going forward. Let's end on this one, John, because we've been here for about a half an hour. Jamie Craig in the live YouTube chat says, what can we expect from Josh Malone tomorrow? I don't think we got to this one yet. I find that to be very interesting, especially since you spoke to him. Seems like a very low-key guy. I'm sure you saw physical specimen. So there's a lot to like. It seems as if he has been stepping up quite a bit in practice lately. So what do you think is, and especially now with the injuries, do you think he's going to have a big showing tomorrow night against the Chiefs or this entire preseason?
Well, he's the AJ Green right now. He's been used as that X, as that split end guy, and they've been like the first play that they've pretty much always come out on 11-11 has been play action and just an over the middle little skinny post to Malone off play action for about 15 yards. And this works pretty much all the time. They've used him a lot on those in-breaking routes. They've gone deep to him a bunch, and has gotten slowly better and better as training camp has gone on. And I think Malone and Dalton have developed more of a chemistry so far because of those reps that he's been getting. So early on, with the starters out there, I would expect Malone to get a handful of targets, specifically coming on those in-breaking routes. And it's really a testament to, I guess, how much they're trusting in him and Cody Core specifically, and how they're keeping Tyler Boyd in the slot, which is where he'll be when AJ Green and John Ross come back. But it's basically like they're taking Malone and Core and just placing them in those roles and not really changing anything else. And maybe that speaks to how much confidence they have in Malone as he goes into year 3. And this is a big year for Malone because, as we saw last year, Tyler Boyd took a huge step in year 3. Malone hasn't had nearly the success that Boyd did in his first 2 years to really justify that assumption. But again, the physical tools are out there, and he seems to have picked up this installation pretty well, and he's been taking advantage of the opportunities that have been bestowed upon him in the light of Green's injury. So they've been going to him a lot in training camp, and I've seen nothing but positive things so far. But again, like I've said multiple times on the show already, receivers tend to go off in training camp, and it's just up to them to really take that into the regular season. But the preseason is where that will start for Malone. But I would expect him to get a handful of targets and really prove himself early on.
Yeah, he's another one of those guys like a Jordan Willis that needs a big camp, needs a big preseason to, he may make the team now because of necessity and injury and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, for at least everybody to feel good about, wide receiver group and where the offense is headed. If AJ Green is to miss some time in the regular season, he's got to show up and prove that he can, he's not an AJ Green, but maybe prove that he can be a reliable guy and make some plays. This has been the Orange and Black Insider listener question show as we get set for the Bengals to kick off their 2019 preseason, their opener against the Chiefs in Kansas City. We thank you for your questions. You've been a little quiet on the phones tonight. We've got we got some shy people. Usually the phone blows up, but we got some texts and a lot of questions in the live YouTube chat, and we appreciate that. We appreciate you spending your Friday evening with us, and I definitely appreciate John, your time. I know, you spent a lot of time interviewing those Bengals members recently this week. And, obviously you're spending your Friday night with us too. So I appreciate your time and effort. And as I mentioned, the interviews that John conducted along with Nick Manchester of CincyJungle.com and Jake Liskow of the Locked On Bengals podcast, those interviews are on all of our channels. They will be fully uploaded to YouTube as of later Friday evening, but the audio is all available on all of our channels. And if you are not a subscriber to our channels, please subscribe. Please leave us a rating and continue to download our content. You can get our stuff on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Spotify, on Google Play, on Megaphone, and on YouTube. And then all of our stuff is on cincyjungle.com. Those interviews, we'll have some of the audio and stuff. If you prefer to get that stuff on cincyjungle.com, there should be a post with some multimedia on there too. So check that out. John, I appreciate it, man. Enjoy your weekend and enjoy the first weekend of Bengals football being back.
Yeah, just hoping not bored about the middle of the second quarter, which is usually what happens. But we'll see.
Yeah, there might be a overabundance of running plays and things like that, but it happens. First preseason game, it might get a little sloppy by the time halftime rolls around, but we'll see. It's real football in the Bengals, real football in a sense, and the Bengals are back on the field, and it's going to be exciting to kind of see what they look like under this new staff, how they react. And hopefully it's in a positive way where we can be impressed and feel good about things for the rest of the summer. Thanks, John. Thanks to everybody out there watching us live. Thanks to those of you who download the program afterwards. We'll see you after the game. We will be recapping that, and then we'll see you on our regular weekly show as well. Thanks.